Warning, the Renegade Recruiter is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious recruitment, staffing, and search business owner who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches, without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Terry Edwards. The Renegade Recruiter is unleashed.
Hello. This is Terry Edwards from Renegade Recruiter, and welcome to another. Get my words out. And welcome to another episode of Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. And of course, we're joined by my co-host Drew. Hiya, Drew.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
Yeah, very good indeed. Very good indeed. Remember, if you enjoy the show, subscribe to. You can subscribe via iTunes and leave a review. Please. If you enjoyed it, share it with your colleagues. If you didn't enjoy it, drop Drew an email because it's all his fault. But seriously, show notes. Head over to.
Just get in. Don't drop me an email. I don't. I don't actually care about your feedback. By the way, just to cut that out right there. If you don't enjoy it, don't listen to it.
Yeah, the good point actually. Yeah. Just at the side, we had somebody. It wasn't aimed at us. Somebody posted something on LinkedIn about how some of the comments on LinkedIn were silly and a waste of time. I didn't respond, but I was tempted to say, if you don't enjoy the comments or the feeds on LinkedIn, then don't read it. I mean, I thought it was a really silly thing to complain about. But anyway, I digress. Listen, for show notes, head over to therenegaderecruiter.com. That's therenegaderecruiter.com. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about something that I covered in an email quite recently, but I wanted to cover it again because, it just kind of touched a nerve with a few people. So here's a bit of a backstory. I was speaking to one of my clients a few days ago. We've been working together now for about 6 months, and he was really pumped because he's had one of his best quarters ever. Now, it goes without saying, whenever a client's had what I call a storming quarter and they're getting great results, I'm always pleased. But this one really made me smile, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But first of all, a bit of background story. This particular client, before he set up his business on his own, he worked for a big financial recruiter, one of the big international financial recruiters, and he was billing in excess of $400,000 per year working for this particular firm. And like a lot of top billers, he thought to himself, why am I here making all this money for this company and just taking a fraction of the commission when I could own my own business and keep a lot more? Sounds like a smart idea. And let's be clear, let's be fair rather, that's not too uncommon. But what he found was, working for himself, he wasn't able to replicate those results. In fact, he'd been hovering sort of between 150 and 200,000 a year, almost half of what he was billing before. He was pissed off. He was frustrated. He felt a bit of a failure, a fraud. And every day he was beating himself up on about how he's fallen out of love with the whole industry. And you know what? I've got a confession to make. It reminded me of myself, and that's probably why it struck a chord. Because when I started my own recruitment business, I went through exactly the same thing. You know, before I went off on my own, I was billing 300 a year, 250, 300 a year. In my first year on my own, I built just under 80,000 in my very first year, and it made me question everything. I was kind of thinking, well, was it luck before? Was it the fact that I worked for a big firm? I did work for a big firm. Or am I not good enough? Why can't I do this? Well, people only buying from me because perhaps of my good looks. Well, maybe not. But I did begin to really doubt myself and what I was capable of. And it got to the stage where I really dreaded going into the office. I'm just going to work. Because I just wasn't, I wasn't bidding what I was bidding before. literally, well, I built in a year. I did in a quarter previously, and I didn't want to tell my family about it, and I didn't want to tell my friends about it. I got to a stage where I didn't even want to go out at times, because invariably they'd be saying, "Well, how's business going?" And all I wanted to do was just change the subjects. And what I know is when you have those doubts, even if you're keeping those doubts to yourself, the people really closest to you can really tell how you're feeling. Sure, you can put a bit of a front, but they can see it. Even if you don't say anything, they always just know. So anyway, back to my client, why his story made me smile more than ever. As I said, he had one of his best quarters ever. But I wasn't just happy about his financial success and what that meant to him. I mean, that's always good, don't get me wrong, that's always good. The thing that made me happy was that his friends and his family had noticed a difference in him. In his words, his exact words were, he was actually enjoying the recruitment and search business again. He had more confidence, more belief in himself. And do you know what? He's only scraping the surface of what he's capable of. I think the other point to that as well is not only will his family and friends have noticed a difference, but his clients and candidates will have noticed the difference as well. Because whatever you think is, if you've been through that stage and you've fallen out of love with what you're doing, if you think that your clients and candidates, as well as your family and friends, haven't picked that up, you're sadly mistaken. It's that unspoken communication, and we've all met people, and you kind of think deep down they're not very happy. Now, when you run your own business, you know to be successful, you can't be giving off that kind of message. What are your thoughts on that, Drew?
Again, a couple of questions for you, Terry. The story. Again, I read the email, so I knew of the story already. And it's not an uncommon story. The story of the recruiter who's working for a big firm, or even not a big firm, but working for somebody else, is getting certain results and thinks, I'm going to go out for my own, and I'm going to replicate these results in my own business and get to keep more of the commission. And then they're sort of faced with a shock that they're unable to replicate the results they were getting. It's something that we see a lot. And the question now for you is, why? Why does that happen?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think the first one is just because you're a great recruiter doesn't mean you're going to be a great business owner. And there's a massive difference between the two. And most recruitment and search firm owners are former recruiters that then go off on their own. But here's the thing. If you've never been taught how to run a business, you've never been taught how to generate leads, how the hell are you going to know? So I think that's a really big factor. I think the other factor is that when you go off on your own, and run your own business, that's what you're doing. You're now running the business. It isn't a case of just doing the recruitment. You've got so many other things to quite frankly worry about. And as you grow, you then bring in other consultants. You've got them to worry about as well. And honestly, it's not as easy as we think. And I want to say quite clearly here, I was one of those people that thought, oh, this is easy. I can do this. I can work from home and keep my overheads down and build sort of numbers I was building before. I think another big factor is you go off on your own. You worked in a big team, and I worked for a big recruitment company. I worked in a large office with a large team around me. It's then completely different going off on your own. And it's one of the reasons why things like the Elite that we run work so well, because you've got peers that you're going to bounce ideas off with on a regular basis. It's one of the reasons why recruitment and search firm owners that have coaches and or mentors of some kind tend to do well, because they've got something to bounce off on. Because let's be fair about it, Drew. And you and I know this as well. Before we took on our coach and mentor, it can be lonely at the time. It can be lonely at times running your own business, and at times you can kind of question your own sanity as well. Some of the challenges you go through, but working with other peers and working with a mentor, it's kind of reassuring that you think, actually, I'm not going mad. The challenges I'm having now, my colleagues are having. The underperforming consultants that I always seem to attract into my business, my colleagues are having the same challenge. The fact that hiring managers, or rather HR or perhaps talent managers or whatever they're called now, won't let me speak to the line manager. It's not just me. Other people are having exactly those same challenges as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm finding it so difficult to get business, I'm not alone. The fact that cold calling isn't working now, I'm not alone. And I think they're the main reasons, Drew, why when you go off on your own, initially it can be a real challenge and your billings can drop quite dramatically.
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
Yeah. Okay, and then just sort of outside of business, another point you touched on there is that you, when it was happening with you, that you sort of you felt like a failure, and you didn't want to sort of talk about it to your family, you didn't want to talk about it to your friends. You lost belief in yourself. You started questioning everything. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, just thinking about it. I remember distinctly. I'd come home every night, and my partner would say, "How was business?" And after a while, you didn't want to talk about what a struggle it was. And I would just go, "Oh, it was okay." And I think she realised, actually, because she wouldn't ask me any more about it. And as I answered the question, I was kind of thinking, please don't ask me any more about it, because I really don't want to talk about another day of failure, of not being able to speak to clients, and candidates being rejected or whatever. I didn't want to share that with anybody. And then meeting friends, as I said, and you're talking to. I remember going out. A whole group of us went out for a meal for a friend's birthday. So there's probably about, 15 or 20 people around the table in a restaurant. Everybody was laughing and joking, and they brought up the subject of business, how business is going. Everybody around the table was either employed by a big organisation that had their own business and were sharing their successes, and they were going around the table. And when it got to me, I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to talk about my family, anything about the business, because there was that embarrassment. I'll be honest with you, Drew, I seriously considered, lying about it and saying, yeah, it's going fantastic. But I didn't want to do that, so I just changed the subject and just laughed and joked about it and thought, like, I want to talk about something else. It was absolutely awful, and that dread of going through that was really, really, really painful. And it wasn't. And I wish I could say that the transformation was overnight. I was very lucky, Drew, that I talked about it many times. Got a business coach that looked at the business and looked at what I was doing, and he set some really together. We set some really ambitious goals about what we wanted to achieve. But don't get me wrong, we didn't achieve them in the first year, but he did transform the business. And I went through that where he's like, wow, I'm now enjoying this. And although that was painful, what I went through, bizarrely, I'm kind of grateful for going through it, because it made me a better person and made me, I guess, at a level, a stronger person as well. And then when I was bringing in consultants, they were going through those challenges. I had a lot more empathy for them, because I knew what it was like. And I think the biggest thing about this whole thing was about confidence, Drew, just the lack of confidence that I went through. Yeah. But I think you need to go through that low time to then. It actually gave me confidence it gave me confidence for the business, going through those low times, surviving, and then coming through the other end. It's made me a better business person, undoubtedly.
And again, going back to your client who I guess sort of this podcast it was based on initially. What did he do differently to have his best quarter? Because again, I know there'll be people who listen to this now who. A word we've mentioned quite a bit here is like feeling like a failure. And again, often when you say the word failure, people can sometimes associate it with a failed business or a business going bust completely. But we're not necessarily talking about that. We're talking about feeling like a failure because you're below where you think you should be. So again, everyone's got their own idea of what success is. So for the client we're talking about, because he was doing 400,000 working for another company, he wanted to be doing at least that working for his own business as well. Again, just the other day we were speaking to a search firm owner who was doing 7 figures, but he knew that he was about 40% short of where he wanted to be. So he's still underperforming, and because underperforming, he still felt like a failure. So it's about the feeling of being below where you want to be rather than complete and utter failure. But the question I wanted to ask you is what did your client do differently in this quarter that he perhaps hadn't been doing before?
Okay, I'll tell you how I'm going to answer this question. I'll answer this question by asking the question. And then he gave his name. When I first spoke to this particular client, one of the questions that we always ask is, we always say, what is it you want to achieve over the next 12 months? And we then break that down into 12-week goals. And what we then do is you'll meet up with your peers and you'll share your 12-week goals. So he'll stand in front of a room with his peers, none of whom are his direct competitors. And he shares exactly what he's going to do. Because here's a problem for recruitment and search firm owners, any business owners. You say you're going to do something. Tomorrow I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Next week I'm going to do this. Next month I'm going to do this. Next year I'm going to do this. Now, you have that conversation with yourself and you say you're going to do it. But if you don't do it, you're not answerable to anybody. You're not accountable to anybody. And the difference that made the difference for my client was he stood in front of a room with his peers and he said, this is my 12-week goal. And we look at what your goal is. Then we look at the specific action that he had to take, that if he was to take that specific action, he would achieve. So his goal for the 12 weeks, by the way, I think was 55. Actually, apologies, I can't remember the numbers now. 100. Sorry about this, I can't remember the numbers. Whatever his goal was, and then we literally broke down how many retainers he had to win to build those numbers. And if he had to win those retainers, how many people did he have to speak to? And then we literally broke down then the marketing activity that he would have to do. So in a nutshell, Drew, there's a number of things here. First, there was accountability. First, he had a well-defined goal as to where he was going. Then he had the accountability. He shared with his peers in the room exactly what he was going to do. Because he knew that 12 weeks later, he would be standing in front of that room saying, this is what I've done. Because that accountability. He then looked at the specific action steps that he had to take, that when he took those action steps, he would achieve his goal. So he looked at the number of decision makers he would have to speak to over a 12-week period, that if you spoke to that number, making allowances that most people that you speak to or decision makers you speak to will say no for whatever reason. I think he worked on a 25% conversion rate. So he worked out exactly how many decision makers he needed to speak to and how many retainers he needed to win. He broke it all down. And in a nutshell, he took action. Because if you talk to most owners and directors of recruitment businesses and say, do you know what you need to do to achieve what you need to achieve? They go, well, yeah, of course I do. And then you ask them, are you doing what needs to be done to achieve what you need to achieve? Well, and they're not doing what they know they should be doing. Yeah. But with something like the elite, where you've got that accountability, you've got somebody, you're answerable to somebody. And it can be painful. Drew, you and I have sat in there. Well, we said we're going to do things in our elite group and mentoring group. We haven't done them, and it can be really painful sitting there giving all the BS. There's a great saying from a former a boss of mine. It was this: you will either make placements or you will make excuses, but you can't do both. And that's what it's all about. You either do what needs to be done or you're going to make excuses. And going back to him, he shared with everybody exactly what he was going to do, and then he went and did it. Yeah. And he took action and got the results.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thanks, Terry. Again, I think it'd be sort of worthwhile mentioning as well that he will be coming to Market Domination X in June. And if you haven't already claimed your spot, then you should do so too. So if you head over to terryedwards.com/MDX, you can find out all about it. Again, we've mentioned it sort of a few times over the coming weeks. But it's basically it's a 2-day intensive workshop for abnormally ambitious recruitment search firm owners who want to dominate their market and rapidly increase their business revenue and profits. Again, it'll be held in London in June this year. You can head over to terryedwards.com/MDX for full details about that. By the time this podcast actually goes live, I think you probably have about 7 days left to claim your spot before we take the offer down and you can no longer get a spot. So again, if you're interested in dominating your market and become the number one recruitment or search firm in your sector, then you want to head over to there now, terryedwards.com/MDX and claim your spot.
Yeah, and look, you've made some really good points there, Drew. And I talked earlier about what that particular client do. We're gonna in this event, in this 2-day event, we're gonna literally look at your business and look at the specific action steps that you have to take to achieve what it is you want to achieve. So we're gonna sit down and you're gonna share with us what it is you want to build over the next quarter, and we're going to look at specific action steps and the number of decision makers you need to speak to. And something that Drew hasn't mentioned, but I am going to mention is that we're also saying this as well. We're going to give you £100,000 money back guarantee. Now, if you don't think that this event is worth you an additional £100,000 to you, you let us know and we'll refund every single penny. It's as simple as that. But we're going to give you a step-by-step process so you can go away, and this is worth at least to you £100,000. Just think about that. You're going to come along to an event that's worth to you at least £100,000. And Drew used a really good term there, abnormally ambitious. And what we mean by that is this. If you talk to any recruitment or search firm owner and you say, are you ambitious? Every single one says, yeah. But here's what we know. 80% of them aren't really. They haven't got that true desire. They're not absolutely committed to achieving this. That's why it's not for everybody. It is for a very small percentage that are abnormally ambitious who have that true desire and are totally committed to doing this. Drew, thank you ever so much indeed. I really enjoyed it today. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter. Remember, you can get the show notes that that I told you about earlier. If you want the show notes, go over to therenegaderecruiter.com. This is Terry Edwards, Renegade Recruiter. Drew, thank you so much indeed. Until next time, take care, take action, and be relentless.